In this webinar, I will cover 5 tips for efficient and effective clinical trial budget negotiations. Clinical trial budget negotiations are often a cause for delay in the study startup process. It is important to make the budget negotiation process as efficient and effective as possible. Negotiations need to move quickly while covering clinical trial costs. This is often a balancing act because you do not want to give up costs just for the sake of time. Over the next few slides, I will go through 5 tips for better budget negotiations. My first tip is to prioritize negotiations on non-negotiable items. Focus your negotiation efforts on institutional budget requirements and patient care items that will not be covered by the patient's insurance. A common non-negotiable item is study startup. Many institutions that we work with at PFS Clinical have a threshold dollar amount for startup that must be obtained to move forward with this study. For this reason, we focus heavily on negotiating the full startup amount, and we might not spend as much time negotiating fees like IND safety reports. It's also important to focus on items that won't be covered by the patient's insurance. If an angiogram is non-covered in the study situation, we will focus on the per patient budget negotiations and make sure the angiogram is covered by the sponsor. My second tip is to use the coverage analysis as a negotiating tool. Usually sites and sponsors differ in their interpretation of items that are billable to the patient. Many times the sponsor feels that more items are billable than the site does. If the site determines that most items cannot be billed to the patient in the coverage analysis, then this will have a big impact on the budget. I have seen budgets where the per patient total doubles or even triples because of different interpretations of standard of care. Most sponsors will ask why these items cannot be billed to the patient when this happens. Reference the coverage analysis when explaining why this item should be sponsor paid. The argument for why the item is not billed to the patient can also be turned into a negotiation argument. Quoting limiting Medicare rules is always a strong argument for why the sponsor should cover the item. My third tip is to show a sense of urgency when you work with the sponsor, or CRO. Show that you're excited and you're ready to move forward quickly. If they know that you're motivated to get the budget negotiations done quickly, then they're more likely to respond faster and help you to get the budget done quickly. Both of you can mark this off your checklist then. I always like to communicate my timelines with the sponsor or CRO. In my first email, I will usually say that I would like to finish the negotiations within a few weeks and let me know if the negotiations cannot be completed in this time frame. If they do not expect the negotiations to be completed in my time frame, then I can communicate this back to others working on the study and we can push our timelines back. Following up with the sponsor regularly also shows a sense of urgency. Check in with them once a week and ask them how their budget review is going. Also, it's important to respond to their edits as quickly as possible. Don't let them sit in your inbox for a week before responding. Try to respond within a day or two of receiving the sponsor's edits. If there are significant edits, it's a good idea to just pick up the phone and talk through the edits, which leads me to my next tip. Call the sponsor or CRO. Writing out explanations via email can take hours depending on the number of edits they sent back. The same edits can usually be discussed within a half an hour over the phone. It is not uncommon for more than one person at the site and sponsor or CRO to review the budget edits. By having a phone call, everyone who is involved in the budget negotiations can be present. This often prevents double review on the site and sponsor side. Everyone will be on the same page after the phone call. After the phone call, it's important to follow up with the sponsor or CRO via email to document items that were discussed, especially if you agreed to keeping certain fees in the budget or agreed on a specific dollar amount. My fifth and final tip is to have fee documentation ready to go. Many sponsors will request letterhead documentation for site fees, especially administrative fees such as startup. We recommend developing a documentation template that can be used across multiple studies. Sometimes sites need to have more than one template if different departments charge different fees, and other sites have separate templates for observational and interventional studies where administrative fees may differ. Having standard documentation is a major efficiency and helps make sure costs are covered. If you save the documentation as a PDF that can be sent with every budget, you no longer need to rewrite the fees and justification for every single study. Documentation is also frequently required in order for the sponsor to cover certain fees or dollar amounts. Now that I have covered 5 tips for fast and effective negotiations, I would like to bring up one more important step in the negotiation process. The budget will go into the contract, which is a legally binding agreement. Before finalizing the budget and signing the contract, complete a careful review of the budget. Make sure that you reviewed the payment terms and they weren't forgotten while you were working on per patient costs. The billing designation should match the coverage analysis, and triple check to make sure all your edits were incorporated. Many times the budget document will have several comments and edits in it and can look pretty messy by the time you're finished negotiating. Review the document to make sure that all of those changes you edited were actually incorporated. Once you've done all of this, you're ready to finalize the budget and hopefully open the study quickly. If you have any questions or would like more information, feel free to contact us with the information below.